20 of the best thriller authors ever and which of their books are my favourite. Welcome or welcome back to Francesca's Books. My name is Francesca, these are my books, and here we talk about all things thriller books. And I've been thinking long and hard about how to celebrate 20,000 subscribers, which is absolutely incomprehensible to me, so thank you to each and every one of you that is here. I thought the best way to mark the occasion would be to choose my 20 top thriller authors of all time and give you my one favourite book from them. Of course, these are just my opinions, and some of these authors might not even be on your radar. They are just my 20 favourite thriller authors, and some of these authors I have ranked their entire backlist, so I'll leave a link in the description to all of those videos if you would like to go and check them out to see more books from those authors specifically, and one of those is Alice Feeney, our first author. So Alice Feeney has 7 books published and 8 to be published in January 2026, I believe. I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with this author because her books for me are either a huge win, 4.5, 5 star, and then there's a couple which I've just rated like 2 stars. But my favourite book by this author has to be Beautiful Ugly, which is her latest release. I went back and forth on this because I absolutely loved Sometimes I Lie as well, but I think the additional messages from this book just gave it that extra layer. So we're following a guy who one day his wife goes missing, and like a couple of years later decides he's gonna put all his energy into writing his next book, as he is also an author. He goes to this like remote island in Scotland to continue writing, and chaos unfolds. He goes delulu. This was one of those books that I read and immediately was like, I love this. I gave it 4.5 and then just couldn't stop thinking about it. I loved the context surrounding the ideas of this island, what happened to the wife, his role in this book. I can't really say any more than that without completely spoiling it, but I think there's definitely a lot of messaging around this which I just really enjoyed reading, and therefore I couldn't stop thinking about it. It was a 5 star and it's now my favourite book of Alice Feeney's. Next up we have Claire Mackintosh, who also has 7 books that are out. Her 8th is coming out also early 2026. You are going to see a theme here called It's Not What You Think, so I'm very excited for this. I actually do have an advanced copy which I'm also currently reading and I'm loving so far, but I'm only 100 pages in, so can't say too much. But of course my favourite book by this author is I Let You Go. I read this and this just changed what a thriller book meant to me. This changed the whole dynamic on how good a thriller book could be, and honestly this has been my benchmark since I read it. This author actually published this 10 years ago and it was her debut novel, but everybody absolutely loves this book still. There is still new readers finding it. I only read it myself a couple of years ago, but as I say, it's still my favourite by this author despite having gone on to read everything else she's ever written after this. There was a couple of others that did come close. I really liked I See You. Aside from that, this was just a firm favourite. In this, we're following Jenna, whose son is unalived in a hit and run, which is understandably traumatic, and she decides the only way she's going to deal with this is kind of by running away to the Welsh countryside and just residing in attempted peace for a little while. But we also have another point of view of the detectives in Bristol where the incident happened and what their findings are amongst this tragedy. Then we have Meriki Beaker, who I only found in the last 6 to 9 months and then just binged her entire backlist because I love them so much. She has a very strong backlist over a number of years and has 9 books that are currently published and a 10th being published in early 2026. I told you there's a pattern. And the top 2 books from this author definitely are Local Woman Missing, which was the first book by this author I read and loved. And then my favourite pick, which will be no surprise to anyone, is She's Not Sorry. I picked this up on a bit of a whim, thinking that, you know, people are talking about it. I wonder if it's as good as everyone's making out, and I fell in love with it. I know there's a little bit of like mixed feedback when I talk about this book to you guys. Some people don't really understand the hype, but I think for me this is everything I want in a thriller book, and that's why it's a personal experience, right? Not everyone's going to agree every single time. In this, we're following our main character, who is an ICU nurse, and one day she gets a patient admitted and they're trying to work out whether she jumped or was pushed off this bridge. She's now in ICU, so of course can't talk. She's in like an induced coma, and this nurse just gets a little bit too involved in what's going on. I really loved the ending of this book, but I know some people didn't. But guys, I just loved it. Like, I'm trying to justify it, but there is no justification. It was a 5 star and made me read even more of this author. So next up we have Robin Harding, whose entire backlist I have not read, but I have read maybe half of, so I feel is a worthy contestant here in this video. And I also love the book that I'm about to recommend so much. There's just no way it couldn't be included in this list. This author has 7 books out at the moment and has an 8th due for publication in early 2026. We are going to be eating in the winter of 2026, guys. I feel like maybe I should do a video to talk about all these books that we have coming out, but I have actually read this one. It is Oh, I forgot. Her next book is Strangers in the Villa, and this is set in Spain, but it isn't a vacation thriller, which I absolutely loved, and know you guys are going to really like this, but spoilers for now. Of course, my favourite book of hers is The Drowning Woman. If you have not read this already, please, please read it. It is perfect as well to read at this time of year. This was one of the only books I've ever read where the characters just made this what it is for me. I am definitely more of a plot-based reader. The characters can be like fine, but as long as there's a really good plot, I will rate a book higher, whereas some people, of course, are more invested in the characters and it's more about what happens to them and how well-rounded they are, and that's why they rate a book highly. This was the perfect combination of both, and this author did something really special in making me want the best for these characters, which honestly is so rare. So we're following Lee, who is homeless, living out of her car, and she sees this woman who goes into a lake to try and unalive herself and saves her, and then the woman who she saved is like, why the hell did you do that? You have just messed with something big. And then they form a nice, happy, kind of not happy friendship, and it goes from there. The next author needs absolutely no introduction. It is, of course, arguably the queen of thrillers, Lisa Jewell. She has 12 psychological thrillers out. She has a much bigger backlist, but before she was a thriller author, she wrote women's fiction and contemporary. So the actual total number of publications, I believe, is somewhere nearer to 20. It's a lot of books. I've probably read over half of her psychological thrillers, and she is an author that you guys do request quite a lot for me to go through her backlist, but there are so many books and so many that I don't think I would ever really love or enjoy reading. So it feels kind of stupid to put myself through that for the sake of being like, no, 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 no to these four. These ones are the ones I liked. But this was quite a close one because the top 4 or 5 books from Lisa Jewell that I've read are all quite similar. But I've decided to go for The Night She Disappeared. I think this one's quite underrated, and it is very much big missing person energy, which I just do love it in a thriller book. Honourable mentions, of course, are Then She Was Gone. This one was fantastic, but I feel like because I guessed the twist in this, it could never be my favourite, whereas in this one, I absolutely didn't. So we've got 2 points of view in this, one of them following a teen mum who goes out one night just for a couple of hours. Her mum, so the baby's grandma, has like pushed her to go because she's doing nothing. She's just looking after baby and is getting really stressed, but then she doesn't return. Then we have another timeline of a woman, I think it's like a year later, who is just in the woods near this school, and she finds a sign that's like, dig here. Very suspicious. There's always a lot of depth in Lisa Jewell's books, and then often slightly on the longer side. They're not long by any means, but this one is, oh, actually 450 pages, so definitely longer than the average thriller, but I feel like in a way that you're not sat there going, oh, this could have been 100 pages shorter. Like, it really adds to the whole effect, I guess. Then we have Gillian McAllister, who is another fantastic thriller author. She has 8 books published at the moment, and a 9th coming out in early 2026. Again, I will read all these, hopefully. An honourable mention here is definitely Famous Last Words. I read this recently and absolutely loved it. It was high stakes, high tension. But the book that I had to go with because of how unique it is Wrong Place, Wrong Time. I know Michaela also loves this book, so if you follow her channel as well, you will know this one does get recommended a lot. We both are a big fan because of its unique concept. Like, most thriller books are a missing person, an unalive person, or like a cheating scandal, something like that. This follows a crime that happened. So this mum watches her son unalive someone, and she's like, oh my goodness me, like, what are we gonna do now? She brings him home and they start to deal with the situation. They go to bed, and then the next day she wakes up and it's the day before. She then has to go backwards to figure out why the son unalived this person, but every time she meets somebody, of course, then it's the day before again and the day before again, so they also don't remember her. This was definitely something different. If you're sick of like a classic psychological thriller where you know what you're gonna get with those tropes as I've mentioned, I would definitely pick this one up. Next up is my king of thrillers. Like, there is no other male thriller author that beats this guy for me. This was incredibly hard to choose a favourite. It is, of course, John Mars, and it is, of course, What Lies Between Us that I've gone with because of the like legacy I feel towards this book. Almost, it was the second book by this author that I've read, but was another book that really changed the definition of thrillers for me, especially in terms of their twists. Very, very honourable mention to You Kill Me First, which is his most recent psychological thriller and has every single trope that your go-to thriller girly could ever dream of. But I do think this one does take the top spot, and in it we're following a mother and daughter duo where the daughter has her mum locked up in the attic in chains, and the mum is just like, it is what it is. And you're like, why? Let's just say they both have a past. This is definitely a book as well that I recommend to like friends and family if I'm asked for a book recommendation, like completely offline, because I feel like although it is on the darker side, you're gonna have a good time with it. I also forgot to say John Marrs has 13 books out, so this was actually quite hard to choose. I have read the majority. I think I've read 10 out of 13, so I will probably read those last couple so I can give you guys a ranking video. This author also has another book coming out in early 2026, and that book is Dead in the Water. I have actually read a copy of this already and loved it. Then we have Shari LaPenna, who is another author whose entire backlist I have read. She has 9 books that are out. Unsure if she has an early 2026 release, nothing that I've seen, but you never know at this point. And this is an author that I feel her books are very 4-star. You know, they're not gonna change your world. They're not gonna like, you know, make the tectonic plates shift. They are just gonna be good. But the only one that really stands out to me, and this is another author that I have ranked her backlist, so you will know of this book if you've already watched that video, but it is of course Everyone Here Is Lying, because in this book she just took it in a bit of a different direction, and I feel like it worked. It worked really well, but I know some people will disagree with me. The main character in this is just a diva, and if you read it, you'll know what I mean. If you've not read it, I literally can't say, otherwise it will ruin the whole book. So much so, I actually bought this in hardback recently. Where is it? Because I really wanted a hardback copy, I don't know. So I was in TK Maxx and just saw it, and then I saw it, I was just pulling it off then, but it's got a Target sticker on it, so I guess it's been imported from America and not sold, because this is the American hardback cover, I should also say. Quite different, these covers though, aren't they? I think I'd be more likely to pick up this one. So in this, we're following a guy who's having an affair with this woman, and she decides she's gonna call it off. She's had enough, she doesn't want to see him again. So he leaves, and he is angry. So he comes home, and his daughter is home from school for some reason, and he takes it out on her emotionally. But then the next day, his daughter goes missing. So we do have a missing child narrative at the crux of this, but it is so much more. Then we have the wonderful, harrowing Lucinda Berry, who has written 15 books, and she's slayed every single one of them. I have never ever read a bad book by this author. The book that most of you will recognize from her is The Perfect Child. This is her most popular, but it's actually probably my least favorite. I think it was good. I didn't not like it, but I just didn't love it, and everything I've read since I've enjoyed more. This author always puts some sort of mental health topic or representation or issue into her books, which always make them a lot deeper, and the material itself is always a lot darker than a lot of authors. So I would go in with caution, but she is still just one of the best thriller authors. And the book that I'm going to recommend, and that is my favourite, although this took a lot of deciding because they're all very similarly sat at like a 4.5, is actually The Best of Friends. And I love this book for every single reason. It was really different, it was really unique, and it really played on the characters in the book, which again were the thing that like crossed over the line to this being my first thought when it's talking about like my best Lucinda Berry book. Notable mentions are definitely Saving Noah. I really struggle to rate this book because it's so different to everything else I've ever read. If you're going to try it, check the trigger warnings, but it is the book that everybody kind of like circles back to and talks about when they hear Lucinda Berry. And also The Secrets of Us. I loved this book. I really loved it. It was a super solid thriller. I loved the dynamic between the sisters in this book, but The Best of Friends is the one we're going with. And this follows, you'll be very surprised to know, 3 best friends, and they all had a son at a very similar time, so there's only like a 2-year age gap between the eldest and the youngest, so they're all like best friends as well, and they go and do stuff together. And one day there is a horrific accident where one of the boys is unalived, one of them is left in a coma, and the other one is just completely mute. He's way too stunned to speak. He's like in full shock. So the adults in this situation try and work out what the hell has happened. And it's a story of like found family almost, but obviously with a huge thriller spin. This is definitely not a contemporary book. Then we have the wonderful Riley Sager. I love this author, aside from his last 2 books, and I don't think I am in the minority there. Before his last 2 publications, I would say he was my probably favourite author, definitely top 3 because of his like legacy work, I guess. And the book that I'm about to tell you about was so incredible. This was another one that just absolutely blew me away, and I was like, this is the new standard of thriller. Before I tell you about that one, my honourable mention here is the book that nobody talks about and nobody likes, being Final Girls. I absolutely love this book. It was a 4.5 when I finished, and I bumped it to a 5 because it's just that good. I don't know what it is about this. I don't know whether it's the female main character that I really clicked with, the twist at the end I really liked but didn't like at the same time, but it was just brilliant. But of course there's no other book that was going to be than the only one left. This is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, as a dark, harrowing thriller that is extremely atmospheric. That's how you could sum it up. We're following this care worker who goes to look after a suspected serial unaliver, and she's completely paralysed now in old age, but wants to tell her version of events. So she's given a typewriter and she types it out for this care worker like very slowly with one finger. So the whole book is basically getting her one letter of events. But while she's telling it, there's also other people working in the house that are also in the narrative that she's trying to tell. So it gets quite twisty, and it also is actually set in a place looking like this, like very atmospheric, on cliffside vibes. So Riley Sager has 9 books out. As I say, the last 2 weren't to my taste. The first 7, fantastic. I don't think there is another anticipated release from this author because he only just released With a Vengeance in summer 2025, but when there is, I will let you know. So we're halfway through, 10 down, 10 to go. If you're enjoying this video so far, don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you can get all the best thriller book recommendations. So next we have Frida McFadden, the US queen of thrillers herself. There are so many books I could talk about here, so many that I enjoyed, so many that I would just never ever give the time of day. She has 25 psychological thrillers at last count. She is the queen of churn and burn. She gets those books out like her life depends on it, as well as being a doctor. Can you imagine being that talented? So her October release is coming out in a couple of weeks now, which is The Intruder, and then she has another book that's coming out early 2026 called Dear Debbie. And my honourable mentions for this author definitely are Do Not Disturb. I think this is her most underrated book. I don't see many people talking about this one. Slightly more now. It's been traditionally published in the UK. I think that may have been where the jar was. Before it was easy to get your hands on in the UK, like I kind of don't blame people for not reading it. The other one definitely is Never Lie. I really enjoyed this as well. This was a very much locked room winter thriller that was giving all the vibes, but there is no other book that could be my favourite Frida McFadden without it being The Housemaid. This is just the classic Frida style. It has the best twist, it has the best characters. It's been turned into a film as well, for those of you who didn't know, because I never talk about it. There's a little secret happening. I was indeed on the set of The Housemaid. I know. I've only just been allowed to talk about it though. It's been hell on earth not been able to talk about it for the last 9 months. I went in January, and the amount of people that have messaged me going, wait, were you? And I'm just like, no, don't know what you're talking about. I was. Oh yeah, when I went book shopping in New York in January and vlogged it, that's when I went. That was the surprise. So on that trip, I did indeed get my book signed by Frida herself, and by Michelle Marone, and by the screenwriter of the Housemaid film as well. I'll have a couple of pictures here if you guys want to see me on set. Again, I've only literally just been able to talk about this, so enjoy those. I have vlogged the whole thing, but that won't be coming for a little while, but you'll be first to know when it's coming. So The Housemaid follows Millie, who is a live-in nanny for this really wealthy family called the Winchesters. She's interviewed by Nina, who is the wife of the family, and then Nina is married to Andrew and they have a daughter, Cece. So Millie goes to start working for them and is just like, oh yeah, okay, this is fine, like must be nice to be rich. But then it just falls into chaos, especially when she's shown to her bedroom and it only locks from the outside. She's thinking, what have I done? Next up is B.A. Paris, who has 7 books, all of which I have read, and I feel like I regard B.A. Paris similarly to Shari LaPenna. Her thrillers are solid, I really enjoy them, but there's only one that was a real standout that I continue to recommend, and even then the book I'm about to tell you about is definitely more of a popcorn thriller. It is of course Bring Me Back, and I just love this. This is the concept, okay? This guy's girlfriend disappeared 12 years ago and he was heartbroken, he was distraught, it was horrendous for him. But now in present day, 12 years later, bearing in mind, he's now made a new life for himself with her sister. Absolutely nobody talks about this book. They always talk about Behind Closed Doors, which I did like, don't get me wrong, like it was a really good book, but this was very much suspense, whereas Bring Me Back felt more psychological thriller. Then we have the wonderful A.R. Torre, who has 10 books that are published, most of which are available on Kindle Unlimited, which is always a win. As always, I do have a Kindle Unlimited 3-month trial code linked in my description. It's linked in every single video for if you guys want to go and try that. I do believe it is only for people who haven't tried KU before, but if you just got a Kindle or something, it might be useful. I've read around half of this author's books. Some of them were good, some of them were just okay, but there's one that I do talk about a lot, and that is the reason that she's made this list, quite honestly. It is, of course, The Last Party, and this for so long this year was my favourite book of 2025 so far. I do think it will make the top 3 still because it's had such an impact on me. And we're following this woman who is so obsessed with a serial unaliver that she will do anything to get his attention, including copying his crimes on her own daughter. Doesn't really get much darker than that, I fear. I really like how this played out as well. This author's writing was super easy to read. Again, it was on Kindle Unlimited. I did get the physical copy because I was so obsessed. Since I've read The Last Party, her other books just don't come anywhere close anymore, and I haven't read her more recent ones, so maybe it's more of like a recency thing that her writing has changed direction slightly to be more like this than how they were before. But either way, I would highly, highly recommend checking this one out. The next author, I've only actually read 2 out of her 12 books, which I know isn't a lot and probably doesn't really even give me the weight to say which is my favourite, but she has to be included because she is one of the best thriller authors out there, I guess. But it is Claire Douglas, and the book that I absolutely loved was The Couple at Number 9, and this was so layered and I absolutely loved it. And then the other book that I've read is The Girls Who Disappeared, which I also really liked. So now I'm kind of thinking, why haven't I read any more? If you've read another Claire Douglas that you absolutely loved, not just like a classic, oh, it was okay, psychological thriller, please leave a comment and I'll go and read that one next. The Couple at Number 9 follows, you'll be surprised, a couple. And guess where they moved to? Number 9. But then when they move in and they start renovating the garden, they're getting like all organised, they're really happy, they're newlyweds, it's all very happiness. But then when they dig up the garden to renovate it, they find 2 bodies under the deck. And the other reason that makes this book so profound for me is that it's told from 3 points of view, from the wife in this couple, her mum and her grandma. I just love it. Like, it's like a generational tale almost, because the house that they've bought belonged to her grandma, I think. There was also a very surprising romantic subplot in this, to the point where I didn't even know if it was supposed to be a romantic subplot, but I was eating it up. I read this book so quickly. Then we have another author whose backlist I have not completed, and I have only read 3 of her 7 books as well. The author is Jennifer Hillier, and of course my favourite book by this author, because I literally don't shut up about it, is Little Secrets. This just had so many layers to a missing child story that it just went straight to like some of my favourite books of all time. This was easily my favourite books of 2024. I did read this now at the back end of 2024, but straight away just went on like every top off list. In this, we're following a woman called Maureen, and she's at this like market with her son. I think it's like a Christmas market, and he goes missing. She literally takes her eye off him for like 5 seconds and he's just gone into the crowd. A year later, he's still not being found, so the police are like, we're gonna have to like take budget off this case, etc, etc. And she's like, no, you're not, like literally no, like we will find him. But they're adamant, so she decides to hire a private investigator instead, and what that private investigator uncovers is insane. And also, we love our female main characters a bit delulu, like she is crazy in the best way. The next author is somebody who, the second I read her debut novel, I dived into every single book she has written. I have never rated a book from this author less than 4 stars. It is of course the wonderful Andrew Mara, who has 8 books published, 5 of which are traditionally published that you can just order normally. The first 3 I am really struggling to get my hands on a physical copy of, and so I'm reading it on Kindle, but they're the only ones I haven't read because I haven't been able to get a copy of. So the most recent 6, all 4 stars or above. Like she just hits the mark. And my favorite thing about this author is on page 1 the action starts. Like there is no hesitation, there's no of this like preambling, oh this is our main character and all this is where she lives and this, just none of it. Like the concept is like within 2 paragraphs. A definite honorable mention here is All Her Fault. I recently read this, rated it 5 stars. This is a missing child story, but done in some of the best way I've ever seen. But the book that we're going to go with, and it just has to be because it's the book that started my love from this author, is Hide and Seek. This was one of the only books I've ever read and physically couldn't put down. Like, you know, all the time you're like, oh, here are books I couldn't put down. I literally couldn't put this down. Like I was reading it on the way to like the train station, like walking. And then I remember I was traveling and I'd got off the train at the other end and I was like getting into the Uber like this. Like that's when you know that you just have to know what happened. And then I was just like being really antisocial, like. Anyway, it was a 5-star. The ending was incredible. The only thing I will say is Andrea Mara tends to include quite a lot of characters. I would take your time digesting the first 50 pages of these books. I feel like there's a temptation in thriller books to read them quite fast because they are so fast paced, and I'm absolutely guilty of this too. But with these books, I would recommend taking just the first 50 pages like a bit slower, letting it digest, understanding who the characters are, and then the rest of the book you will just fly through. In this one, we're following a woman whose child goes missing again. I think Andrea Mara has something against kids, honestly. But we're following 2 timelines, one from present day and one from the 80s, and the 80s where the child went missing. And then in present day, a new woman moves into the house where she disappeared. But what I loved about it was over these 2 timelines, a couple of the characters are the same, just obviously at different points in their lives. So there's quite a lot of overlap, and I love seeing how those characters have developed over time as well, and like what happened to them, but almost at the start of a book. Highly recommend. The next author is somebody who is quite new to me. I only picked up the first book by him like 3 months ago, but I've since read another 3. So I've read 4 of Charlie Donnelly's books now out of a total 10, including his brand new release called Guess Again, which only came out this summer. I rated this 5 stars and absolutely loved it. But it's not the book I'm going to talk to you guys about. The book I am going to tell you is my favourite, is The Girl Who Was Taken, because this one knocked it out of the park for me, especially with it being the first book by this author that I've read. I think my expectations weren't particularly high. I was just doing an order on US Amazon of a few other books that I wanted to read and weren't published in the UK, and I just saw this and was like, oh yeah, like I recognise that cover, like I'll just add it in. And it's by far the best book that I read off that order and over those few months. His writing is a bit more sophisticated than some thriller authors, which I feel like is a huge win for me personally, because sometimes you're sick of like a popcorn thriller and the writing being really basic. It's kind of giving similar vibes in terms of the writing to David Ellis, and I do draw that comparison a lot, but I feel like these authors are more on the sophisticated end of the scale writing wise, and then you've got like Frida McFadden on this end and everyone else just kind of slots in. But they're also not complicated to read, like don't get me wrong, it was still very easily digestible. There was just quite a lot of like nuance and context into the story. So we're following a couple of girls who went missing at a party, and the sister of one of the missing girls, who was never found, becomes a forensic pathologist to attempt to get closer to kind of what's going on, and has just made it her life's mission to find the sister. But the other girl that went missing finally showed up with absolutely no memory, of course. So they're trying to put the story together as a little duo. This was also a 5-star read. If you haven't read this yet, I highly recommend it. It is also on Kindle Limited. Next up we have Noelle W. Illy, who has written 7 books, and I've again only read 2 or 3 of them, so I need to make my way through more of her books, but I have absolutely loved the ones that I have read, like loved. She tends to play more into suspense than plot and plot twists, which isn't to my normal taste, but with this author really works. I recently read Grey After Dark, and it was one of the only books I've genuinely ever been actually on the edge of my seat, like suspensefully. I think I put the audiobook on and I was like, I'm actually just too stressed. I'm gonna have to go back to the physical copy. So that is definitely an honourable mention from me. But my favourite, and of course the one I ordered as a trophy copy, is Ask for Andrea, because of its concept. This was so good. I read this like 2 or 3 years ago, I think when it first came out, and just fell in love with it. So it is a through and through psychological thriller, but there's a little bit, it's not horror, maybe like magical realism slash time bending, I guess. So there's 3 girls that have all been unalived by the same serial unaliver, and they meet kind of in the afterlife by accident and all decide to stop him from unaliving anyone else. But I really like this. I think it's because there's nothing else like it that I've ever read. I think at the time I gave it like 4 stars, but now I'd definitely more give it like a 4.5, 4.75. I would also definitely read this around spooky season. It will be perfect. So the penultimate author that we're going to talk about is K.L. Slater. She has 25 separate psychological thriller titles that I could find. I have read her most recent release as well, Lucky Winners, which only just came out a few weeks ago. Wasn't a huge fan of this. It didn't give thriller as much as I was hoping, which you think would be a given with a thriller author. I'm not one to judge, just not to my personal taste. I have read a decent chunk of this, maybe like 5 or 6 of her books, but my favourite by a landslide. I absolutely love this book. Is Message Deleted. I've talked about this to you guys quite a few times because the concept is really original. They really cared about our female main character. She had a crazy backstory. So we're following her in this situation where she gets a text from her best friend that's like, please come over, I really need your help, don't call or text me, like just come here. So she's like, oh my god. She doesn't reply, she just goes, and she was about to have a job interview that was really important as well. Gets to the house and then the friend's like, I didn't send those messages. Looks at her phone and then they've been deleted. So she's like, well, you did, and then you deleted them, this is crazy. And she's adamant she didn't. Character goes home, and then the next day the best friend is missing. So she's like, talk about mixed signals. And then we spend the rest of the book with our female main character working out exactly what's happened. But our female main character has like a bit of a reputation for being crazy anyway, so no one really believes her, which makes this so much more frustrating. I really loved how this was written. I really loved the plot twist, and this book got me into a lot more of Kale Slater's writing in general as well. And then before I tell you about the final author of our 20 top thriller authors of all time, I don't know how I've just sat and talked about 20 authors and I've not stopped yapping yet. But if you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe because I just love having you guys here and would love you to join me. So the final author is Lucy Foley, who only has 4 published books and I've not read them all. So again, don't know if I can comment, but by author 20, I was kind of like, I don't really know who else to include at this point. But I do think she deserves her place here, even though I think she's quite a hit or miss author. So she has The Hunting Party and The Guest List, both of which I haven't read, but are very classic psychological thriller, locked room vibes. And then we have Midnight Feast, which I didn't particularly enjoy at all. But her 4th book, The Paris Apartment, I really did enjoy. This had a twist that blew my little thriller girl mind, especially at the start of this journey. I was like, wait, how? I do like her writing in general as well. I just feel like Midnight Feast for me was just a miss. Like this for me is like golden age Lucy Foley. In it, we're following a girl who goes to Paris, you'll be very surprised to know, to go and visit her brother. And when she gets to his apartment building, he's not there. And she's like, well, like, he just texted me saying he'd be here. And then she kind of does some investigating as to where he is, like asks the neighbours, asks anybody he might have been in contact with, and goes down a huge rabbit hole with it. So those are my 20 thriller authors and my favourite book by each of them. I have been yapping for so long, it has literally gone dark outside. So if you've seen the lighting changer in this video, no you didn't. As always, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I cannot wait to see you next time.